Hello everyone. I do believe I think we're live and up and running now. Just had a little glitch there for a second, but I think we're going. Let's just get a little bit of kind of housekeeping stuff at the start sorted out if we can. If you could just pop into the chat. It really helps, by the way, if you're going to use the chat while we go through the webinar there's a little link at the bottom right that says set name. You don't have to sign up or anything. You can just pop a name in there. Otherwise, you come up in the chat as anon something or other. And it makes it very difficult for me to tell you that I'm replying to you. But if you could just pop in the chat and let me know if you can see me okay and if you can hear me okay. All seems to be working all right from my side as far as I can see. It's a little bit complicated doing this for me because I've got to go by what I can see on the screen. I have a playback error and it says, looks like it's running all right to me. Try refreshing. Oh, Sharon can see and hear me. JMS1 can see and hear me. Thank you. That really helps. Hello, Tammy. Nice to see you. Thank you, Jean. That's nice to hear. Oh, Judy. Good. That's good to know. Have you got it, Renee? Brilliant. I think we're probably all right. So we're up and running. Let's get started straight away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few things today. I think I can do this much better this way than I can in a blog post. The big advantage of doing it this way is that we have the chat. So the first thing that I want to say to you is that at any point while we go through this, if you have any questions at all, just pop it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through. And I'm demonstrating some of the stuff and explaining some of the stuff that I'm doing to you. Probably a lot of it will be new to you. So just stop me at any point. I need to remember to keep an eye on the chat, but I'll do my best and it should be okay. Don't worry about it. Just fire as many questions at me as you like. The entire point of this webinar is for me to get as much information across to you as I can about the general overview of how this stuff works. And specifically how I run my business, if you like, as an artist online. I want to show you all of the moving parts, give you some examples of each piece, so you've got something concrete that you can kind of you can see and hopefully understand better. And right at the end, I'll open it up to a Q&A, but just feel free to ask me anything as we go along. Let me just check everything's working all right for everyone. Steve, you're struggling to hear. I'm just trying to make sure that everybody can see and hear okay. If the sound is all right for everybody else, I'm just going to have to keep going. It might be volume setting somewhere. It always takes a little bit of time at the beginning of these things to just get kind of up and running and make sure everybody's okay with it. Could be louder. It's probably your old ears. What can I do? Let me have a quick look. I might be able to do something about that. No, I can't really. I'm sending it out about as loud as I can send it. If I turn up my mic anymore, it'll start to distort. The only thing I can suggest is if you have a look at if you roll over the video, there's a setting for the volume at the bottom left. You could make sure that that's on full and then make sure that your own volume on your device is on full, whatever you're watching it on. And that might help a little bit. Right, okay, yeah, I really can't turn it up anymore, or it's at full volume now, or it'll start to distort. Hopefully it isn't already. I've got all these little meters running on my laptop to let me know. Okay, so you're here because you want to find out a little bit about how you can go about running a business online as an artist. Now, this is something that I've been doing for, it's hard to say exactly how long because I did it in little bits and bobs, but probably for about maybe 5 years now. I started my site, this site, Learning to See, about 10 years ago. And back then, it was a really basic site. So you can start from really small beginnings. Let me just see, I might actually be able to find an example of my site as it was back then. But you can start from very basic beginnings and build up from there. And one of the questions that's come up a lot for me as I've started to talk about this stuff to people is, do I need to wait until my work is good enough? I don't feel ready is the big thing that comes up an awful lot. I'm just trying to see if I can get up an old version of my site to show, because it'd be pretty funny if I can. No, you don't, because when I started, all I was doing was just sharing the stuff that I was doing. I realized that I needed to improve my skills. I had been working in an office job that I pretty much hated for quite a long time. I decided to go back to I was working in online marketing, funnily enough, which is where my background in all of this stuff comes from. It's just having a bit of trouble finding my site. And I knew that I wanted to get back to being an artist again somehow. Doesn't seem to be working at the moment. Never mind. I'll see if I can find a screenshot or something to send you another time. So I started drawing again, and I realized that I wasn't very good. And I decided that, being as I was working in website stuff anyway, that I would set up a website and I would share what I learned as I went along. And this was 10 years ago, and there was very little information out there now. And I had a real hard out there then, and I had a real hard time learning. Now it's very different. There's loads of information out there that will help you learn to draw and paint better. Sometimes too much, I think, to the extent that it's difficult to choose the good from the bad. But back then, I didn't have any ideas that I would eventually be earning part of my living, or in fact all of my living really, as an online artist. I thought maybe I would be able to be a portrait painter or something like that, but the first thing I needed to do was to learn to paint better. So I started doing that, and I started sharing my struggles. I made myself a rule right at the beginning that I was going to post everything that I did, whether it came out well or not. And to my surprise, that's what people started to connect with, and people started following my site. I had an email address up there. I said, get in touch if you want to. And people started emailing me saying, thanks for sharing this stuff. I'm struggling with exactly the same kind of things. So then I started an email list, just so that I could let people know when I'd put a new blog post out. And it was the most basic way that you could possibly do it. It was just a distribution list in Outlook Express that I used to manage manually. Someone would email me and say, can I be added to your list? And I would say, yeah, fine. It's a bit of a different world now. And this is, as I now realize, is something that the pros out there will teach you about, have courses about, and they call it email marketing. And it's really at the core of making a living online as an artist, and I'm going to explain that to you. So gradually, bit by bit, I got more serious. And then I realized that as surprising as it was to me, that I actually had something really useful to share. So I started a drawing program called Creative Triggers, which was, I think it was $17 a month to sign up for. It is still running now, but I'm about to change it, what's left of that, over to be the new thing, Threads. So Creative Threads will include Creative Triggers, the drawing program, as part of it. And it surprised me even more that people signed up for that. And it went very well for a little while. But after a while, I realized that what I did with that program was I added a lot of stuff that people requested, whether I believed in it or not. So there was stuff like blind contour drawing and that kind of thing, which I don't actually believe increases your, develops your drawing skills at all. And it got to the point where I just didn't believe in it enough anymore. And this is something which I think is really at the foundation of this idea of building connections online, is that you need to believe in the stuff that you put out, because it's very important, I think, to be authentic with people and to be honest with people. And I've tried my best over the years to do as much of that as I possibly can. And that's how I've built up the connections that have got me to the point that I'm at now. I've been nattering for a bit. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat and see if, are we all right? Yeah, don't worry, we're still quite early. We've only been going for about 10 minutes, so you've just joined, that's fine. Okay, looks like the volume is all right for everyone, so that's good news. So the situation that I'm at now, someone asked me recently on a comment of one of my blog posts, is what split of the revenue that I make, the income that I make online, is teaching and what is painting? And this is a really good question, because my experience is people are more likely to be willing to pay you for teaching than they are for your work initially, because you're giving them something tangible which will result in a benefit to them, you know, a development in their work, I think. So I started out with teaching, and I didn't think my work was good enough to sell, you know. And then gradually, bit by bit, I think the first one I put up, the first painting I put up for auction was about 2 years ago. And I just didn't expect it to sell at all. And it did sell, you know, and then a lot of other ones have since. I think I've sold maybe about 50, 60 paintings online now. Most of them sell. There's been one or two that haven't. I don't particularly see them as failures. They were just paintings that didn't connect with anybody, you know, so I get to keep them. Gradually over time, it's become now, I would say, probably slightly more of my income comes from teaching than from painting, but the split is fairly even now, and it depends what I spend most of my time doing. At the moment, I'm doing very little painting because I'm busy setting up threads, and there's a lot to do with that, and doing this kind of stuff, like explaining to you the foundation, if you like, of what it's going to be, and the online business side of things. So that's pretty much the split at the moment. It is entirely possible to make a living online just selling your work, but I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't let you know that I think that's a longer term thing. It would take longer to get to the point where you're earning a full-time living just selling your work. But there's always a caveat here, is that I am relating my experience. Obviously, I've spoken to other people who make their livings online as well. Julian Merrow-Smith is a good friend. I spent quite a bit of time with him, and we've been friends over email for years, discussing what we do. He makes his living, as you know, entirely from painting online, and started off as a daily painter. If you just start off as a daily painter now, so many people are doing it, it's unlikely to get much attention, which is why I think the best way to go about this is by creating connections with people. So I'm going to, hopefully that's reasonably clear at this point. What I'm not going to give you is a step-by-step program, because I don't believe such a thing exists, although plenty of people out there will tell you there is. I don't believe there is. I think you have to find your own way to do it, and the only bit that really matters is that you're authentic and honest, and that you connect with people meaningfully. Because if you can build up an audience of people who trust you, who are interested in what you have to say and who know you, your audience doesn't have to be anything like as large before you get to a point where you can start to make some income from selling your work or teaching or whatever it is you want to share. So, I mean, that's about it for the kind of the broad overview. I'm going to go into the kind of the moving parts of running a business like this, and the bits that you need to have if it's going to work for you. Okay, so the first one, most obviously, is a website. Now, this is the first sticking point, I think, for a lot of people. There are also a lot of options for how you want to build your website. Now, I would say the first step, absolutely, the first step is to get yourself a domain name and get it registered. There are a lot of different hosts out there. The one I recommend is one called SiteGround, S-I-T. Actually, I'll pop it in the chat, so it's there if you want to have a look. This is the one I'm with. And I think they're really good. They have a bunch of different kind of tiers, and you can upgrade as you can start very cheaply and then upgrade. And then there's a one-click install of a WordPress site. So you can register your domain name with them, set up a WordPress site really simply that will be tied to your domain name, and then just click live and it will be up and running pretty quickly. There is a charge, there's a hosting charge for this stuff. But the advantage of having your own domain name and your own site with your own hosting is that it's much better for Google to find you. If you have a site on Wix and you haven't paid the extra for the domain name and it's just wix.something, whatever your name is, or yourname.wix.com, as far as Google is concerned, that's just a very small part of a much bigger site, and it's very unlikely that you'll ever be seen in Google search. And for me, a lot of what built my audience earlier on was people finding me through Google search. As part of Threads, I'll be going into SEO for a website as well. That's something I'm something of an expert on, because I used to do that as a living for big corporates a while ago. So you really need to have your own website on your own domain name. Yes, it's more difficult to set up. I would also recommend having it on WordPress. Yes, WordPress is more difficult to set up. There's more tech involved than Wix or Squarespace. But you're going to need something like that if you want to run auctions. If you want to auction your work off your own site, and I would recommend you, that's the best way to do it. The way to do that is with WordPress. So the big thing is the website. You could say that's your home online. And the next bit is how you reach out to people, how you build up this audience. And your audience is basically your email list. It's people who've signed up for your email list and given you permission to contact them in order to let them know what you're doing. And that's huge, because people are quite careful about giving their email addresses away. I know I'm very careful about giving mine away. I don't subscribe to many sites at all, only if they look like they're very useful to me. Following someone on Facebook or following someone on Instagram is just a click. It's easy. I'm not giving away any personal data or anything like that. Don't really mind about that. But also that connection isn't very meaningful. The people who will buy from you will be people who will be on your email list, preferably who you've spoken to individually. So the email list is, you get people into your site, you ask them to join your email list, and I'll go into a little bit in a minute about strategies to do that in a non-icky way so that you're giving something useful to people in return for their email address. And then gradually you build up your audience, and your audience, basically think about your audience as your email list. Now, how do you get people in there? The two obvious ways are SEO and social media. SEO I'm not going to go into in too much detail now because it's more complicated, but I will have some webinars on that as part of Threads. But the social media side of things is fairly obvious. It's nice to have followers. It's nice to post your work and get likes and all that kind of stuff. But likes, you can't eat Facebook likes. You can't pay your mortgage or your rent with Facebook likes. So the way you need to think about social media is somewhere that you go out to show people what you have, and then you want to bring them back to your site. So if you look at the stuff that I do on social media, at the moment I do a lot of streaming, mostly because I think it's just the best way for me to get as much information out there to people as I possibly can, because I still have this kind of this desire really to help people avoid a lot of the pitfalls that I had when I came across when I was learning to paint and slowed me up. And I want to get as much good information, what I think is good information, out there as I can. But when I put a blog post up there, there's always a link back to the site. So if you want to read the blog post, it will take you back to the site. Let me show you one. We'll go on to, let's go on to, I'll go on to the screen share. It's going to go slightly weird for just a second. I think what as if I'm just saying, you know, give me your email address and I'll let you know when I put a blog post up. Frankly, it's going to take you like, oh, God knows, an extremely long time to build an audience that way. But if you can find something useful and interesting to give them, then they're much more likely to sign up. These days, I think it's probably not enough to say, I'm doing a painting every day, and if you want to see it in your inbox, sign up. If you're like a really, really good painter, then maybe that would work now. But the days when that stuff would go, it was like, 10 years ago, really. That stuff doesn't work so well now. People like to have something more to go on. So you're asking for someone's email address, but also you're asking to build a relationship with them. So you need to do the running in the first place. You need to have to share with them, to find something useful that you have and give it to them. And then you will build your email list much faster. So I'm going to go into, I'll show you how I run my email list, right? So that's the website bit. I know that's a fairly quick overview, but the main bit you want to get about that is your own domain on your own hosting. And I would recommend WordPress, strongly recommend WordPress, because as you go down the line, you're going to need the functionality that software gives you. Yes, it's a pain to use. There is a lot of tech involved, but also as part of Threads, I'm going to be doing webinars, live streams, in depth on how to set those up. And we'll also have Q&As, and I'll be able to do hopefully a little bit of tech feedback when I can. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat. Hopefully you can all see me. I think it's okay now, isn't it, the sound? What about putting your work on Pinterest? That's a good question. That's exactly like putting it on Facebook or Instagram. The key is you need to get people back to your own site. And Pinterest, I think, can probably work quite well. I don't do it personally, because the reason I don't is it's very simple, Pinterest. You can just have an image there and nothing more than that. On Facebook, you can actually connect with people and talk to people. Excuse me. And on Instagram too, a lot more you can actually talk to people. You can put links in back to the site and stuff like that. Excuse me. Pinterest, I find a little bit limited, but I'm sure there are strategies out there that it would work. Excuse me, sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat and a cold. Oh, the sound has gone. Is it? Is the sound back now? Oh, I see. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. The audio went, did it? Hang on a minute. Let me just try something and see if I can. That shouldn't have happened, which is a bit of a problem. Sorry, I'm gonna have to. What I'll have to do is I'm gonna have to flick quickly from one to the other. Sorry, that's a bit of a technical problem. There should be audio while I'm showing you stuff. Let me just see where we got up to. This is one of the things about live webinars is you often get this technical hitches. Right, okay. Right, all right then. So what I was showing you when I went into the off onto the screen share was firstly my website on the back end, and the bit the most important bit that I wanted you to get from that, excuse me, was the little sign up box on the right hand side, where I had a course, a 6-step email course on color, in order for people can sign up, and then I'm giving them something that's really useful. If you just ask people to sign up on your site without having anything to share with them, which is going to be useful and interesting to them, it's going to take a very long time to build an audience that way. So what you really need to do, if you can, is to find something that you have. And it doesn't have to be something specific like color or necessarily even a technique of painting. Something you have that you can share with people that's going to be useful. It could be kind of something more towards studio practice or encouragement, or just that you're sharing a lot about your own learning process, that can be useful as well. But you need to find something that you can give to people first before they'll give you their email address back, and then your audience will grow much more quickly. So that was kind of, let me just check that the sound is okay now. I think I know what the problem is, but it's not something I can sort out without stopping the stream and figuring out. So that would be a little bit annoying. So we'll just work with things as they are, as they're working at the moment. But I'm not sure now what you did here, but the main point I want you to get from that website thing was to have your own domain name on your own hosting. The host, there's a host I would recommend called siteground.com, which is what I put in the chat a minute ago. They're very good. And they have different kind of levels that you can sign up for. Highly recommended. And it's really simple to set up a WordPress site with them. So your own domain name on your own hosting and a WordPress site. You want your own site so that Google can find you. If you're on Wix, the chances are you will never be found in Google. And Google is a great way, and SEO is a great way to attract people to your site. And once you've got people coming into your site, that's when you have an opportunity to say, here's this thing I've got for you, this useful thing. So definitely approach it that way, rather than a Wix site, I would say. If you already have a Wix site and you're determined to stick with it, then we'll work with it, you know, and we'll see what we can do. It might not be the end of the world. But if you want to, you're going to need your own domain name still. If you want to, you can set that up in Wix, but it's a paid service. If you want to set up auctions, I think you'll need a WordPress site for that. So the next bit is the email list. Now, I'm not sure if there's, I will show you just really quickly the software that I use, okay? I think that probably it will go, the audio will go off when I put it on, so I'll just show you it very quickly. So the main thing that I showed you there was that the subscribers, and a little thing that shows you the number of subscribers that you get each day. So that's my site. That's how many roughly how many subscribers I get a day. And I use a piece of software called ConvertKit, which is actually quite expensive, and I wouldn't go for something like that until you're a bit further down the line. But what you can do is there's a much one that does almost all of the same things called MailChimp, which is also really, really good, and you can start off with that for free as long as you don't mind having a little MailChimp logo in your email. And that's no big deal, you know. No one's going to really worry about that. So MailChimp is a great way to start. And they also have, then I showed you the screen of the broadcasts, which is the actual emails that I send out to people. You probably saw, I have about just over 9,000 subscribers for my site now. But I started out with almost none, you know, so if you don't have any subscribers at all now, don't worry about it. You just build them slowly. And the key, I think, there again, is to have something useful to give to people, and then to build meaningful connections with them. And if you've got that, then you don't need such a big subscribers list. My email list I've had for many years now, and the chances are about half of the people on that list don't even open my emails anymore. You know, you can prune the list, and I probably should. It's probably nowhere near as big in terms of people that actually engage with me still as the 9,000 that I've got on there. So don't feel that you need to get to 9,000 subscribers before you can turn professional and start to make some income. You really don't need to be that big. It's more important to have meaningful relationships with people than it is to have big numbers, I think personally. Yeah, MailChimp is a really good, if you can get a WordPress site set up and you can sign up for MailChimp and get a MailChimp form on your site, it's not too difficult to sort out. What I think I'll probably do is some streams on how to hook those two things together, how to set up a WordPress site on a host like SiteGround, and then how to sign up for MailChimp and how to hook those two things together, so that what happens is when someone fills in the form on your site, the email address gets sent through to MailChimp, and then when you send an email out, you do that all from MailChimp, from your email provider. Just let me have a quick look at the chat. Do you have to protect your domain name if it's your own name? I'm not sure what you mean by protect it. If you've bought the domain name and it's yours, then it is protected. I mean, no one else can take it off you unless you let it expire. So if you buy a domain name for 2 years, you buy it for a period of time, unless you let it expire, no one else can register it. If it expires and you get traffic, then someone will snatch it really quickly. So you have to be careful about that. But there's no extra step to protect a domain name. All you need to do is to buy it. One thing I will say though, is don't spend a lot of time on websites like Easily or what's the other one, HostGator and sites like this, putting in various domain names that you think you might want, because people watch those sites. They have software that watches those sites, that sees what domain names people put in for tests to see if they're available, and then immediately registers them. If you're going to hunt for domain names that you think you might like, do it on a reputable site like SiteGround, and then you won't. They kind of snatch it out from under you before you've got a chance to register it. That's happened to me a couple of times. So be careful of that. But there's nothing else particularly that you need to do. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Your personal privacy. Yeah. Personally, I don't worry about that. Because if someone signs up for your email address, for your email list, it's law that you have to put your address in, and I don't actually mind. This is a personal thing and it's my approach, but I think people worry a little bit too much about that stuff. I mean, you've seen how many people I have in my email list. I also have followers on YouTube and Facebook, and a few on Instagram now too, because I've just started doing that. I've never had any unpleasantness, apart from people disagreeing with something, a blog post on my site. I've never had any unpleasantness at all. So me personally, I mean, that's a personal call, I would say. Yes, you can pay extra to have your address and everything hidden. I've never bothered with that because I don't feel it's really necessary. Can you export the MailChimp stuff to ConvertKit later? Yes, you can. And in fact, I did exactly that. I used to be on MailChimp and then I switched to ConvertKit. And they did the setup for me because I had a fairly large list. They just took my list out. I gave them my MailChimp login. They just took it and did it themselves. But in any case, you can just export everything and then import it again into another provider. You're not tied in. Yeah, site and MailChimp is definitely the way to go to start with. Yes, and you can set up your domains to auto-renew. And I have mine set that way. Excuse me, sorry. I was saying I've got a bit of a cold at the moment and my throat is going. And the more talking I do, the more difficult it gets to keep going. But yeah, hopefully that explains. Those are kind of the two main building blocks: is your website and your email provider. You need both of those things. You can't really run your business without those two. The tech it's not that frightening. I mean, if you can use a word processor, you can figure this stuff out, and I'll be there to help as well. So don't worry too much about that. So the social media stuff. Someone was asking about Pinterest earlier on. I guess really you just need to try and see what works for you. I will say this: I've found Facebook to be by far the best for me, because it helps me. Actually, as I was saying before, you can make a real connection with people on Facebook. You can have discussions. You can stream live. You don't have to use all the cameras that I use. You can do it with a phone these days. Perfectly good way to do it. and then you can chat with people as you're doing it. You know, it's just a better way for you to make a connection. Instagram is the big one now. I've only just started using it, and it is possible to grow a follower count there quite quickly compared to Facebook. I think because it's so immediate and so lightweight, there's much less cost in following someone on Instagram. There's a bit of cost doing it on Facebook. You're basically saying, I want to be in touch with you, and you'll be able to see everything I put up. If you become a friend with someone on Facebook. On Instagram, it's a bit more, well, I'm just going to follow your posts, and then maybe you'll follow mine. But it's a bit more, I've found just by putting up pictures and not very much else besides, as I say, I doubled my follower count fairly quickly. But when I look at the stats for my website, I get very little people coming through from Instagram over to my website. And the whole point of the social media stuff, if you're going to do this efficiently, is to bring people back to your site, because that's your home, and that's where you can give them the best stuff that you have about you, all of the stuff that you share in your blog posts, all of your work. Instagram and Pinterest, I see as they're kind of their promotion in a way, but they're not relationships. Facebook is more of a relationship, but we'll see. I'm still experimenting with Instagram and figuring out the best way to use it, so I may end up using that more at some point. We'll see. The SEO side of things is the other way that you can bring people into your site, and you have to have your own domain for that. It will not work if you have it any other way. As I was saying, the SEO thing is something that I'm going to go into more because it's fairly complicated, and I think part of the problem with SEO is people assume that they want to be able to rank on Google for something like buy paintings online. And the competition on a phrase like that is going to be so high you really have no chance to rank for it. So you're still better off using social media. And I think the best thing to do with SEO is simply to make sure that your site is set up right. Don't go overboard on trying to put in loads of keywords and stuff like that, because it will just look unnatural anyway. It will look unnatural to people who visit, and it will look unnatural to Google, which is quite clever these days at figuring out that stuff. But there are some basic things that you need to get right to make sure that Google can crawl your site and that that's working. You know, little things to do with images, because image search is quite important to us as artists. But as I say, that I'll be going into later. But the social media side and the SEO side are just ways to pull people into your site, back to your home ground, where you can make a connection with them. And speaking of making a connection, this is something that I struggled with this a lot at first. You probably noticed that I share quite a lot of myself online, and it's something that I guess I've over the years I've kind of built up a tolerance for it. I found it quite difficult at first, and I used to write blog posts sometimes, and I'd look at them and I'd think, yeah, I'm not going to publish that. I can't publish that. It's too personal. But what I've found is I've grown over the years an immense faith in human nature. And I've found that the more I share, the more people share with me. Not always publicly, sometimes just over email. But I have had some incredible emails from people who've related to me their stories and where their stories correlate with mine. And unless you share enough of yourself online, that's never going to happen. And you can build the closest connections with people that way. You make real friends that way by sharing stuff. Because as I was saying before, a lot of us go through the same stuff. And it's really meaningful if you can get to a place where you can comfortably share that. You have to find your own level, and your own level will probably, your barriers will probably move further out as you go. But if you really have a problem with that, then I think you might struggle with this stuff. You need to be able to be open enough and honest enough with people to make a connection. I think that's really quite important. But you don't have to do it all straight away. As I say, when I first started out, I was a little uncomfortable about doing too much. Let's see what else. We've got a few things in here. How is ConvertKit better? It's a good question. I just like it more. It's easier to use, and it's more flexible. So I have people who signed up for lots of different stuff that I've done over the years. And in ConvertKit, you can tag people. You can in MailChimp too, but you can tag people much more simply. So if I've got, say, a subscriber in my email list, I know if they've done my color course. I know if they've signed up for one of the free things that I've done. I can go in and find out whether someone's been to a webinar that I've done, or that kind of stuff. And that's very, very easy to do in ConvertKit. You can do it in MailChimp, it's just not quite so easy. I would say MailChimp is slightly clunky compared to ConvertKit, but ConvertKit is more expensive. You kind of get what you pay for, but MailChimp totally works. You know, I could be using it now, lots of people do. Is 60 years old to start going on the market? Is it too old? No, God, no. I really don't think it is. I mean, there's no age limit to painting. There's no age limit to producing meaningful work, to putting things out into the world that people connect with. There's no age limit to that. You might, I mean, if you want to get really good at painting and you really focus, you could do it, I would estimate, broadly and generally, in 5 to 10 years. So you still have plenty of time left. You don't, you know, you can still paint really well at 70. One of the interesting things, at least I hope so, because I'm 53 now myself. One of the interesting things I think is that I have a feeling, and there is some research, not just a feeling, there is research to back this up, that being involved in the arts keeps your brain alive much longer. Your thought processes don't atrophy, and you will stay sharper and clearer much, much longer. 60 is absolutely not too late. It's only too late if you believe it is, I think. Why can't you use Gmail or a free email? Because Gmail or a free email won't allow you to build a subscriber list. You can just say, yeah, the problem is that the bit that it doesn't do is you can't have a list of people that it will store in a database that you can then access, write an email and say, send it to all of these people. You can't do that with Gmail. An email provider is a very different thing than just having your own email address. It's a piece of software with a database that allows you to set up email templates, write emails, and then send that email out to everybody on that database with a single click. That you can't do with a free email. I used my Outlook email for a long time, and it's a nightmare. No, until I got to the point where I had 500 subscribers. I'm not saying you should wait that long. You totally shouldn't. The amount of hours that I've lost sending out individual emails to like 500 people. Don't do it. Get MailChimp. It would be much easier. The MailPoet plugin is a very good email newsletter facility. Interesting. The data is held in your WordPress database rather than externally in a paid-for provider. That sounds like it might work, but I haven't seen it before, but I'd almost guarantee that you won't have the same features that you have in an external provider. You won't be able to tag people so that you know which bits of your content they've engaged with. And that's an incredibly powerful way to build more meaningful connections with people. I know in general terms, if someone on my list is more interested in color or design or something else of the various things that I've posted about, I can see that inside the software. You have to set all that up. You have to set all the tagging yourself, but it's incredibly useful because it means hopefully that I don't send too much useless stuff to anybody, you know, and which cuts down the unsubscribes. You have a WordPress blog and you send out a newsletter on MailChimp. Can you amalgamate the two? You have WooCommerce for selling from the blog. I'm not sure what you mean by amalgamating MailChimp and WordPress. If you mean what you can do, this is how I think you should use the two together, is you create a form in MailChimp and then you embed that form on your WordPress site. So when someone signs up on your WordPress site, the email gets sent through to MailChimp and it gets stored there. That is how you want to work this stuff. That's how it should be set up. That's how mine works, except my form comes from ConvertKit. So yes, WooCommerce, yeah, I don't have any experience with it. I'm sure it works pretty well. Apparently they have an auction as part of their software now, so I'll have a look at that and see what I think. It's not the one I use, but the one I use is incredibly ugly, I think. So, you know, it might be better. I'll have a look. What's your opinion on Faso using your own domain name? Now, I suppose I should be careful here. I wouldn't do it. The reason I wouldn't do it is because you're limited to the functionality that Faso supply you. The sell for them is that they have an audience and they will send traffic to your site. You know, I've yet to meet anyone with a Faso site who just gets visitors just from Faso and does really well and makes a living online doing that. It ain't going to work. The big problem is that you're tied into their platform, which means you can only have the functionality which they supply. When you have your own WordPress site, you can extend the functionality in any direction you like just by adding plugins, many of which are free. That's why I wouldn't have a Faso site. I know a lot of people do, and you can build a fairly good looking site fairly quickly. If you're mostly bothered, if you mostly want like a magazine portfolio site for when you go and visit, you email galleries and say, here's my work, can I join your gallery? Great, Faso site is fine, if that's your model. I'm talking about something entirely different. Building connections with people online and selling directly to them. And for that, a Faso site isn't really the thing. Excuse me, my voice is really going now. Eat the veggies, yeah, eat lots of veggies. Gmail lets you send up to 100 IDs max. Yeah, and also you just don't have a database, you know. When someone hits unsubscribe, then is that handled automatically? Yes, entirely automatically. You'll see when I send out an email, there's a little unsubscribe link at the bottom. I don't have to worry about any of that. It just happens. Now, interestingly, I'll show you actually just really quickly because this is an interesting thing. I know the sound is going to go off, but let me show you this. Just be 2 seconds. So hopefully you saw there that at the end of each of those emails, those are all broadcasts, which is basically just emails that I've sent out. And at the end of the stats for each one, it showed you how many people had subscribed. And I generally get between 15 and 20 people unsubscribe every time I send an email. So you need to make sure that you grow your list quicker than people leave. But I have no problem with people leaving my list because if it's not relevant to them, I don't want to be sending them stuff, you know, it's not good for them. It's not good for me. Generally speaking, I grow my list by between 5 and 10 a day, and I send maybe 1 email out a week, something like that. So it grows faster than it shrinks. So it works out okay. But yeah, that's all handled entirely automatically. What about having, hit the Rene says, yeah, you have a Faso site. What does Faso stand for? Something artist, something, something. It stands for don't have a bad website. Rene says, I have a Faso site and I think you're right. I've hit the functionality wall, which I find frustrating. I like to tinker. Well, it's just, I mean, I don't mind a bit of tinkering as well. But the thing is, you can't, there's a lot of stuff that I do on my site. I can't talk you through it now, which I was hoping to do because we've got this problem with the sound. But there's a lot of functionality that I add to my site that I could not do with the Faso site. And a lot of that is to do with where I put the forms for people to sign up for stuff. I don't know if I bet you're limited with Faso with the contact forms that you can put up. And I bet you can't hook a Faso site into MailChimp. I bet you can't do that. So if I want to run a webinar like the one that you're attending now, the one I'm giving you now, you know, I'm doing here exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sharing as much good information with you as I possibly can. There's no charge for this. You know, obviously at the same time, I'm talking about Threads, which is the new thing that I'm building. So you know that that's around and it's coming soon. But you can have this information whether you sign up or not. I don't mind. You know, please have it. It's going to be useful to you. So I don't think you could do that. I mean, with a FASO site, because the way that I let you know that this webinar was happening was with a blog post, right? I sent you an email. You know, you signed up because to show some interest in Threads because you want to find out about this stuff. So I have a separate list of you who are attending this now, of people who I know are interested. So I'm not talking about a bunch of stuff that someone who's only interested in color, they don't want to hear about it. You know, it's very focused on what you want to hear. Without ConvertKit or MailChimp or something like that, I could not do this. You know, I sent out an email saying I'm doing this webinar. I put up a blog post, and as part of the blog post, I embedded a form in the blog post to say register for the webinar. I don't think you could do that on a FASO site. On a WordPress site, it's easy. I should qualify that. Once you figured out how to do it, it's easy. And I can show you how to do it. It's not that difficult. But yeah, I don't think you could do that with a FASO site. Fine Art America Online, that's right. Yeah. I'm not even American. I don't know if I could use it. What plugin software are you using for the webinar? Oh, for this, it's not a plugin at all. I'm using YouTube. Basically, I'm doing a live event on YouTube, and then I take the URL of the video and I stick it in my, on a page in my website. So that's how this is working. What you're actually watching is a YouTube video. You could watch it on YouTube as well. The little chat thing at the side comes from there's a few other ones. I'm probably going to change this at some point because I think there are better ones now. This is Chitango, and I just embedded it into the sidebar there. That's the chat that you're using. That comes from another site as well. So for this webinar, you've got my website, and then I'm pulling in the content from YouTube for the live stream. I'm streaming out from my cameras out to YouTube, and I'm also pulling in the chat from another service called Chitango. And that stuff is really easy to do on a WordPress site. Could you do that on a FASO site? I very much doubt it. You know, so much of this stuff depends on you being able to set up your website for how you want to do it. And webinars, I have to tell you, are probably the best way to connect with people. You can share really good information. The only thing I don't like about them is that I have to have the chat, is that we can't just talk. You know, you can do Google Hangouts, and I'm going to, actually, that's worth mentioning. As part of the Threads thing, I'm going to be having Google Hangouts as well, which is slightly different because then we can do website crits and even work crits and that kind of stuff live, which will be useful. Google loves WordPress, yeah. WordPress is much better set up for SEO. Okay, what are you going to teach exactly on Threads? Okay, this is a good question. So if there's no more questions about the actual stuff that I've gone over at the moment, let me tell you, I'll tell you a bit about what Threads is. If you're not interested in signing up for it, then that's fine. I hope that what I've given you so far was really useful. Sorry, my throat's really closing up. I've run out of water and I've got cold tea to try and keep it lubricated so I can talk. Right, so yeah, that's the bit where I've shared basically an overview of the main parts of how this approach works. So, Threads. You probably know, if you've come, I think you will have probably have seen the blog post, so you know why I've called it this and why I'm always banging on about connections, meaningful connections, and that's why it's called Threads. So a very large part of it, I will be explaining in detail how all of the stuff that I've been talking about today, the website, the email stuff, even webinars and live streaming, how all of that works, and demonstrating how you put it together. There's also going to be, because the work is very important as well. No one is going to be interested in what you do if your work isn't interesting enough, isn't good enough. So I'm going to carry on doing a lot of the stuff that I do at the moment that you've seen me do in live streams, but there'll be a lot more focused about specific areas of painting. There will be a lot on colour, obviously, because I think it's so important. But there's also going to be, regular practice exercises included, which comes from the Creative Triggers side of things, which is a drawing program that I had. Because developing skill, I think, happens through regular practice, not just painting, through specific exercises. So there'll be some of that. I'm going to be doing 2 live streams a month, which I think I'll probably duplicate, because there's probably going to be a broad range of time zones to cover. Everything will be recorded, so the streams will be live. Now, the reason I'm doing it as live streams, as not as a prepared course, is that I've done that already with my colour course, and it works well, but it's set in stone. It's very difficult and very time consuming to go back to it and then to change it again. Sorry, I'm just checking that, checking the chat again. So the thing about live streams is that it can evolve as we go. I have a bunch of topics that I'm going to cover, like email software providers, how to set up a website, how to hook the 2 of them together. All of that technical stuff will be covered in detail. There'll also be a lot about the most important thing, which is how to build an audience online. Very few people really cover that well, I think. So I'll be showing you basically how I do all of the stuff that I do to encourage people to follow me, to hook up with me, and to give me their email address, so that we can then start to build a real connection with each other. I'll also be covering how I run my auctions. I've got a webinar coming on that next week, actually, but obviously it's the stuff that I do in Threads is going to be much more in depth. And then I'll be covering the painting side as well. As well as that, there's going to be once a month live hangouts. Now, the way this works, it's more like a conference call among a bunch of people at once. So anyone who wants to come along, who has a question about anything, wants me to have a look over their website, or how they run their email list, anything like that, wants some advice, or on painting, crits on work as well, I'd be happy to do. We'll all get together, and this will kind of build the community, you know. We can support each other. So we'll have live hangouts once a month. So it's going to be 2 live streams a month and a live hangout once a month. I'm also including all of the Creative Triggers drawing program material. So this is a bunch of exercises and some advice about getting into a regular practice habit to enable you to develop your skills and produce better work. I'm also going to put in my colour mixing course, not the big colour course, because that's a big standalone thing and I think needs to stay like that because it's very focused. But the colour mixing course, which is kind of a subset of the colour course, that's going to become a part of Threads as well. So that's basically what it's going to be. It's a subscription thing. I'm going to be starting like a monthly subscription, so you can just join for a while. And for that, you'll basically get like 2 live workshops a month, plus the community part of it as well. And there'll be a Facebook group, a private Facebook group as well. So we can talk together and I can give you feedback on what you're doing. The goal for me is to be able to take you from wherever you are now and to move you further towards whatever it is you want to do, whether it be earn a full-time living from teaching online or from painting or some side income, or just to be part of something bigger and exciting and learn more about how the online stuff works. That's basically what it's all about. It's going to be $19 a month. And as I say, it's going to open its doors on the 30th of this month. I'm going to do a webinar, probably a live webinar on the 30th, just to kind of, I suppose, to celebrate the opening. And I'm going to go, I'm almost decided on what the topic is going to be. And I think what I'm going to do for that webinar is I'm going to cover how to build an audience online, just in a lot more detail, and give you some examples of how I do it, and fix the audio so that I can show you some screen shares at the same time while we're doing that. So that's kind of gives you a bit more idea of what it's going to be. Will it cover the technical aspects of doing videos and live streams? Yes, if you want it. The great thing about me doing it as live streams, which is why I've invested all of this money in good live streaming equipment, I can live stream now with the same quality as a course. Everything will be recorded, so it will build up into a library over time. And you will be able to give me feedback on what you most want to see. So if enough people want to find out about doing live streams, I'll do as many streams as people need to be able to get up and running with that. Yes, and I will absolutely share everything about what I'm doing at the moment. I won't be holding anything back at all. Some other stuff I'll be learning as I go along too. Like Instagram, I want to start doing a lot more because I know you can embed links in stories now. So there's a lot of potential there for bringing people back to your site. So that I'll be looking at as well. Will the older courses mastering color? Mastering mixing is going to be part of Threads. Mastering color is going to stay as a separate thing because it's very focused. And I just like the fact that people that sign up for that are learning this very specific thing with a very clear step-by-step approach. And it's working really well as it is, so I don't want to break that one. But at the same time, I'm putting the color mixing one in because I think that basic knowledge about color mixing and Munsell is going to help because obviously I'll be talking about that as a part of Threads as well. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Will you talk about how to set up a WordPress website? Totally. I'm going to take you through everything you need to know. One of the first streams that I'll be doing will be registering a domain name, and I'll do all of this live. I'm going to set up a kind of an example site. So I'm going to take you through everything as we go live. One of the things you can do with WordPress, I'm not sure about the wisdom of this, but it might work out, is you can run a website as a team. So we could possibly have an example site. We'll see. There's a high chance it could get broke, but it would just be like a sandbox. So, but anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to register a new domain name, sign up for a hosting account, set up a new website, sign up for MailChimp and hook all of that stuff together and use that as an example so I can show you in detail. And the sound will be working while I'm on the screen doing it as well. So yes, that will absolutely be covered, all of that. I think the most important bit, the tech stuff, don't worry about it, Yes, it is daunting, but I'm going to be taking you through all of that, and it's not as difficult as it seems. I think what you'll find is the bits that you will end up, that will need more soul searching and will be more demanding is the bits where you start to give of yourself, to the wider internet, and to find people out there and bring them back to your site and to build connections with them. That's the bit that matters. The tech stuff is just it's a means to an end. I think a lot of the time people get too wound up on the tech stuff itself, and they think if I do this, it will work. If I do that, it will work. If I use this provider, it will work. A Faso site will work. A Wix site will work. None of that stuff will work if you're not building meaningful connections with people. Hopefully it's obvious to you that that's what I do as much as I possibly can. I'm trying to build connections with you all the time. I'm trying to give you really, really useful stuff. I give you a rule of thumb, actually, that I have for the stuff that I put out. I try to make my free stuff as good as most people's paid stuff so that someone can come to me, even if they can't afford or don't want to buy any of the training materials I have, they will be able to learn enough stuff to be able to go away and to get as far as they want and to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that I came across. Then for the people who do want to go to the next step and sign up for the stuff that I do, for those people I go overboard and really try to produce exactly what they need and give them personal feedback on the stuff that they do. That's basically how I set up, how I approach my stuff. So let me just see if we've got any more. Yeah, that is brilliant. You set up a WordPress site and you're 64. There is no age barrier to this. Do not feel because you're older that somehow this is a young person's thing to do. It totally isn't. It really isn't. That's brilliant. Well done. If you've got a WordPress site already, then I'll show you how the bits that you need to care about and how to work them. So I'm just checking I haven't missed any questions. Any questions, get them in now, because I'm going to be wrapping up pretty soon, okay? Anything at all. And I must stress this as well. Everybody has to learn all of this stuff at some point. So if you don't know anything about it at all, nothing is too daft to ask, ever. You know, just ask me a question. I will never think, oh God, you don't know that? That's not me at all, you know. Anything that you want to know more about, just stick it in the chat box now. You can email it to me if you'd rather not do it publicly, and I'll answer your emails if I can, and I'll get back to you that way. Your work still sucks, but you've had a lot of interest in getting a site running. Yeah. You added your realname.com to your host last year at some point. That's all right. I've actually got, I've had this learningtosee.co.uk has been going for about 10, 12 years. But I've actually got paulfoxton.co.uk. You can check it out. It's like a half-built site that I'm going to move everything to eventually. I got it about a year ago. I haven't done anything with it yet. I'm just too busy, you know. But eventually everything that I do is going to move to paulfoxton.co.uk. As you know, again, it should be obvious to you by now that I'm completely open about what I do. You know, I'm me. I'm not some pseudonym. You know, and when I come to the internet, I bring all of myself, because to be honest, it makes it more meaningful for me as well. You know, I don't want to be. I've done my time in boring office jobs that had no meaning to me. The stuff that I do now, I get out of bed in the morning and I can't wait to come down here and come into my studio and start working, whatever I'm doing, whether it's a blog post or I'm painting. You know, this stuff is so rewarding. It is hard sometimes. Painting is hard, right? You know that. Learning to paint is hard. Producing good work is hard. Putting yourself out there is hard, you know. But that's what this stuff is about, and it means that you can live a much more meaningful life. And I think that's also really good for your longevity as well, personally. Obviously, for me, that has special relevance because I think it was the job I had and the toxic culture, corporate culture that I was a part of, is largely responsible for me becoming so ill a couple of years ago. So the way that we made this jump, that I made this jump, thankfully I have an incredibly understanding wife who said, yeah, we're going to have to do it, you know, let's do it, is we sold our house and moved out to the countryside. We don't own this place, you know, it's rented. I couldn't have done it any other way because I was too ill to work at the time. So far, it's working out really nicely. You used to build HTML sites in the 90s. Yeah, me too. My first one was an HTML site. It was horrendous. I'll try and find it for you. Yeah, it's much easier. Yes, absolutely never too old. Yeah, freelancer.com. You can find people online as well. Yeah, that's good. Missed this before, but is the color portion of threads exclusively using Munsell? Yeah, frankly. And I make no apologies for that because it's absolutely the best way that I've found to unpack colour and understand it, and then to make better paintings. That's how I do colour, is with Munsell, yes. I won't be doing other stuff because Munsell is the end, that's all I use. If you want to learn other stuff about colour, I'm not sure. You see, I think Munsell is just the best way to learn it. So if I didn't use that, it would be a bit like me like I used to do on Creative Triggers, doing blind contour drawing exercises for people when I didn't really believe in it. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I believe Munsell is the best way to learn colour, so that's what I will be covering, yeah. Your name keeps changing. I think that might be because you're a non. You need to set your name. Rene, I'm glad you think it sounds great. Yeah, it could be timing out. Yeah, Cash. I don't know. I still call you Cash. I don't know. That's a decision you just have to make, but make it soon and settle on one and go for it. If it were me, I would err on the side of being closer to being just straight up yourself. You know, that's what I would go for. Oh yeah, if anyone wants to have a look at Judy's Shinnick, thank you Judy for that. It's really generous. So just put her site in there. I've been hounding Judy for a while to set up a WordPress site, and she has done it now. She did have a bit of help setting it up, but you have a look at Judy's site, and that will show you. You think only Wix sites or Faso sites can look good. That site looks amazing. You know, looks better than mine. I'm a bit annoyed, but have a look at Judy's site. You know, you can all have sites like that. It's very doable. Tammy, what can you share with people if you were not teaching, pulling in the artists that want to learn but only painting? Wouldn't your audience dynamic be different? What can you share with people if you're not teaching? Now that's a difficult one. If you're not teaching at all, if you're just sharing your paintings, I think it could work. But the bit that I think people will connect with and be most interested with is your personal struggles about how you make it and your process. You can certainly, you could be sharing the psychology behind what you do. As I say, the struggles that you go through, days when you find it difficult to turn up. I'm very honest about that stuff, and I've found that people really connect with that because they share those struggles as well. And it's nice when someone comes along and says, you know what, me too. You know, I get that too. I have days when I can barely face the easel as well, when it's very difficult. I have days where, you know, I'm really depressed, days when I'm deflated, and I have days when I'm firing, you know. All of that stuff I think you could share. But if you want to kind of workshop that stuff with me, then we can, you know. You will have something that you can share. Someone taught Munsell at Pratt. Wow, I'm impressed. That's brilliant. So do you recommend getting the Munsell books to enhance the Threads course? That's a good question. I would recommend getting them anyway. The student book probably, yeah. Yeah, the student book would help. Because the colour stuff that I do on there is the colour stuff that I do, and that will be Munsell related. You don't need it to be a member of Threads, no. But when I'm talking about colour stuff and I'm doing painting demonstrations, then I will be talking about Munsell. So it would help to be familiar with it, yeah. Yeah, it tells stories about how you came to paint a particular scene. Yeah, all that stuff. Can you use a Blogspot blog? No. Blogspot is like Wix, whereas you're something.blogspot.com, which means as far as Google is concerned, your site is just a very small part of Blogspot. It's not your site. It's not a separate site. You have to have that separate site on your own domain name. Blogspot is the same as Wix in that way. Not great. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to wrap up now. Sorry about the sound problems. There was a bit more that I wanted to show you that I couldn't do because I needed to explain it. But we'll find a way to do it. Perhaps I'll manage to cover it in the next webinar for you, which is going to be not next Wednesday, the Wednesday after. Next Wednesday, I'm doing the one on auctioning your website, so you might want to come along to that. If you have a look on the blog, there's the last post about that. There was a form in there to register for it. So you're going to see my blog post differently now. So you'll be able to look down the blog post and see where the form is. That form is pulled in from ConvertKit. So if you sign up for that webinar, I'll know. And I'll know you came to this one too. All of that stuff is linked together in ConvertKit, linked with WordPress. So that's next week. I'm doing one on that, on auctioning. But don't worry about that. If you're going to sign up for Threads and you can't make that one, don't worry, because I'm going to be doing loads of stuff on that in Threads. And then the one after that, I'm going to do a webinar on Let's Fix It Now, growing your audience online, because it's the most necessary part of it all. I'll do an in-depth webinar on that just for you. So yeah, and that's also the day that I launch it, that I open the doors. So if you want to sign up for it, that will be the time to do it. That will be the earliest that you can sign up is then. Okay. So I hope that was good. I hope that I managed to teach you something. If you think of anything, any questions that you have that I didn't answer today, stick them in an email and send them to me, and I'll do my best to give you an answer. Okay? And stay in touch, and we'll see how we go. Thanks very much for coming, and I'll see you soon.